Hey everybody, I got this weird glitch or bug with Logic, and I'm going to do this video to explain exactly what's happening. I tried to post about it a day or two ago, and I got a lot of suggestions and even some questions, which I appreciate, but they were all wrong, basically, because they didn't understand the problem. It's a really strange and complicated problem, so I'm going to lay it out here. Let's just jump right into the video. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start a new Logic project, completely empty. There's no tracks. I'm going to create one track that's going to be a guitar DI track. So I'll go ahead and rename that guitar DI or DI track or whatever. And I'm going to load my guitar amp sim that I tend to prefer to use, which in this case is going to be a Neural DSP Mesa Mark II C+ suite. I'll go ahead and arm the track for monitoring and recording and test it out. All right, so that's all working, and yeah, I'll go ahead and I'm gonna record just an example. Doesn't matter what it is. Before I jump into that though, here is a look at my audio settings, because I know people are gonna ask for it. IO buffer size 64. If we go over to the General tab, plugin latency compensation set to all, pretty standard stuff. All right, I'm going to go ahead and blow this up a little bit bigger so that we can really see the waveform, especially the absolute beginning portion of the waveform. Go ahead and play back and loop it. Everything sounds fine. I mean, aside from my mediocre playing. Now here's where the rub begins. Say I want to commit this, I want to bounce it and, get rid of the DI track and more importantly, get rid of the plugin so that I'm not eating up resources. Go ahead and click the bounce in place, right? No big deal. Standard settings, and there it is. But let's blow this up and look at it. There's a big, giant gap of, I don't know, dead air at the beginning of this bounce now. At first, my initial thought was like, oh man, bouncing on this plugin is causing latency or delay. But if I listen back to it, it's actually playing perfectly in time. There's just dead space at the beginning of the bounce for some reason. And if you were to, play this, or more importantly, loop this, you hear that little cut every single time it were to play over and over again. That's a huge problem. Now here's something that the super awesome gentleman from wylogicprorules.com website and YouTube channel, I sent him this test project and he solved this particular point. He said through a series of phase cancellation tests, no, this isn't delay that's getting inserted into it. It's just creating dead space at the beginning. So he said, okay, you can drag this out and you're going to have extra recording at the beginning. And now if you drag that out and bounce it in place, everything will potentially work okay. Now, the weird thing, if you zoom in here like I just did, is you can see there's a teeny tiny little smidgen of audio before the very first bar, or in this case, it's sitting on bar 2, but that was, bar 1 where I recorded. It shouldn't have recorded anything prior to the punch-in, I wouldn't think, but, there's that little tiny smidgen there. But go ahead and bounce this in place now that I've moved it and dragged out the absolute beginning of the file, and hey, everything is perfect. You can see I got that little bit of extra audio before bar 2. And yeah, now, everything is lining up just right. And then, there's a dramatic difference between the first time I bounced prior to dragging out the beginning of the file and moving it over to the right a little bit, and this new bounce. Now the question is, how do you solve this? How do you fix it so that when I bounce, I don't have to move the region around and drag extra space out at the beginning, or punch in a bar or two early, like if I wanted to start recording on bar one. And I know people are going to say, just don't record from bar one, leave a little of extra space, blah, blah, blah. Like, I mean, that's just not my workflow. That's not what I want to do. I'd prefer to not have to do that. Now, some people had suggested, why don't you just, in the previous post that I made, don't record on bar one, just record, on bar two or whatever. That makes no difference. You get the same results either way, which I'll demonstrate here really quickly. So, here's my retake of recording from bar two and leaving a bunch of extra, pre-roll, I guess I would call it, right? And then if I bounce this, the results are going to be the same, as you'll see. Like, yeah, here, yep, it's fine. It bounced just fine. Well, it's because I have all that extra space already dragged out. But what if I were to trim the DI track and then bounce it? And then I get the exact same results as I had if I had recorded from bar one. Meaning I can't trim my file before I bounce it? That's weird, right? So yeah, the exact same results as my first attempt if I were to trim this before bouncing it. And again, it's like, that's just my workflow. I like to keep things all trimmed up and tidy, and like I like to punch in and record exactly where I need to. I don't want to record early if I don't have to in order to compensate for this weird bug. If I do this exact same process in Cubase, which I own and I do not prefer, I prefer Logic by a wide margin over Cubase, I don't get this problem with this specific plugin doing this specific process. It works perfectly fine as expected in Cubase. But here in Logic, I get this weird issue. Does anyone know? Is there a setting? Is there something that I can do to stop this from happening? Is there some way that I can record from bar one or from wherever the loop marker starts, where it punches in, and not get this little gap when I do my bounce? I can't figure it out.